What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with another episode of WNBA Today on CLNS. This time, recapping the Las Vegas Aces 107-98 win over the Indiana Fever, an overtime thriller that sees the Aces punch their third ticket to the WNBA Finals in just 4 seasons. And really, what this video is going to be focused about is a spectacular Indiana Fever playoff run coming to an end. We're gonna have a few days here to talk about the Aces and how they got here and how they match up against the Mercury. So I'm gonna save that for other videos, but I really wanted to talk about this Fever team one last time before. We don't know what they're gonna look like next year. Obviously, expansion drafts, free agency, teams never come back the same. This was an incredibly unique group. This was a special group, and honestly, like I don't know how you even try to like sift through what we just witnessed with this group, because there was a moment on the floor where I'm watching Shey Peddy and Aerial Powers and Odyssey Sims, players that were literally out of the league earlier this season, Brianna Turner, who wasn't playing, and they're fighting and they're keeping up with an Aces team that includes Asia Wilson and Chelsea Gray and Jackie Young and Jewel Lloyd and some of the most accomplished players in this league. And at the end of the day, basketball is basketball. And I say this all the time when we make projections about how is this team going to fare during the season, or what's this team offense going to rank like when you take away these two players. And you can use modeling, you can use stats, but at the end of the day, the players have to go out there and do the thing. And in this case, the Fever just did everything they could to stay alive. For those of you that watched the game, which I assume is most of you, there was a heartbreaking sequence of events that included Kelsey Mitchell laying on the floor. It was truly one of the strangest injuries that I've ever seen on television, where she had been kind of like, rubbing or grabbing at her quad a couple of times earlier in the third quarter. And then at one point, after Aaliyah Boston was called for her fifth foul, that's a whole other topic we can talk about, but she kind of like leaned over to the ref and just collapsed onto the ground effectively. And next thing you know, all of her teammates are covering her with towels, as is customary in the WNBA, where players are usually covered from the cameras, which is actually a pretty cool gesture and tradition that the league has. But she was down for a while. There was a commercial break. They came back. Kelsey Mitchell still down. At one point, they brought a stretcher onto the floor, and she looked like she refused the stretcher and was able to kind of hobble out with the assistance of several other people. And Stephanie White said post game that she is in the hospital getting fluids for a lot of lower leg cramping. So I guess that's good news in the sense that I assume that means she'll be fine and make a speedy recovery. Information is kind of coming in as I'm recording this, so maybe by the time you're watching this, we have more intel on Kelsey Mitchell. But the bottom line is she only played 23 minutes in this game. The Fever didn't have her for the entire fourth quarter, and they did not have her for overtime. And as you know, Kelsey Mitchell has been the engine for this team, was one of the WNBA's leading scorers all season long, was the second leading scorer of these playoffs after Asia Wilson, and was absolutely the player for this Fever team. And so for her to go down in the third quarter on the same play where Aaliyah Boston gets her fifth foul and now she's going to have to play in foul trouble the rest of the game, uh, it was a 4-point game at that point, but it felt like it was just over. A 4-point game had never felt so insurmountable. I was like, in 5 seconds, this is going to be a blowout, because now they're without Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston. Everybody's shook from what they just watched. Aaliyah Boston was in tears on the bench. At least it looked like. And Stephanie White gave an incredible speech that you should go and watch, where she basically just was like, "We are meant for this. We have been in this position before. We have to go play for her." And the irony of seeing a huddle filled with players who are in street clothes, basically saying we're going to go fight, and that they did, because I never would have guessed in that moment that we'd be going into overtime. Not against this Aces team that is so talented, that honestly didn't play poorly in this game. And I know that technically I should probably be talking about the Aces in this video, but I'm going to make several other videos about the Aces. So this is the Fever content that is certainly coming. I'm really actually very excited for this playoff matchup between the Asia Wilson and the Aces, and Alyssa Thomas and the Phoenix Mercury. But the fact that the Indiana Fever were able to get to this point and pull this off, I'm gonna have to rewatch this game, honestly, because it was just stunning. The first player that I want to talk about is Odyssey Sims. I've said this a bunch of times about Odyssey Sims. I feel like a broken record at this point, but she was out of the WNBA in August and was waived by the Los Angeles Sparks. And we've talked a lot about Veronica Burden and the way that she was able to respond to being waived by the Wings to have the most improved player season that she's had this season. Odyssey Sims is right up there, and she's a vet who has been waived a bunch of times in her career. She had a playoff career high, 27 points on 7 of 14 shooting, 12 of 13 from the line, 6 assists, scored the final 4 points in regulation to force overtime, 2 free throws, and a difficult finish that she's made look really easy, honestly, throughout these playoffs. But she has been the Fever's second leading scorer this entire postseason, which is, again, remarkable because she was a hardship player that anybody could have signed. And she was sitting at home. And so she was just a hero in this one. And, she left it all out there. And it wasn't just her. Shey Peddy came off the bench and gave them the absolute spark that they needed. Hit some massive threes, was 3 of 5 from three, finished with 13 points, played some critical defense down the stretch. Again, another player that was out of the league. And the Indiana Fever gave them a chance. And Shey Peddy fit right in and did what Odyssey Sims did tonight. And what continues to amaze me is that it's not just these two players. Like before them, it was Ari McDonald, who looked like they found an absolute diamond. And then obviously she breaks her foot, and that's it for her. And it's kind of the next man up mentality. So what really hurt for this game is that I felt like Indiana did enough to win. And I don't think they would have been able to hang in a 7-game series against the Phoenix Mercury, especially the way that the Mercury have been playing, eliminating the last two, finals teams from last year. So I don't think that they would have been able to win at all with this team. But then again, like who is to put a ceiling on what this group was capable of? Natasha Howard, who has accomplished a lot in this league as well, she came up huge down the stretch here. 16 points for her on 7 of 16 shooting. And then Aaliyah Boston fouls out of this game. And if you look at her box score, this has kind of been the MO for Aaliyah Boston in these playoffs, where it doesn't jump out the stat sheet. It doesn't look remarkable. She finished with 11 points, 16 rebounds. I mean, that kind of does jump off the stat sheet. 7 of those were offensive, 2 assists, and obviously 6 fouls because she fouled out of this game. The last, foul came in the final minute, and that was a foul that sent Jackie Young to the line. And on the replay, it's like there was contact on that rebound, but at the same time, it's just so hard with WNBA officiating right now because there is there's such a lack of clarity around like what is a foul and what you call and what you don't. And that's not exclusive to the WNBA. The same thing happens in sports across the board. The same thing happens in the NBA. But I did think that Aaliyah Boston was on the wrong end of a couple of really tough calls, especially in that moment to foul her out and to potentially win the game on free throws. Obviously, Odyssey Sims responds well to Jackie Young's 2 free throws and ties the game up and sends it to overtime. And Jackie Young missed a game winner attempt at the buzzer that ultimately the Aces don't have to think much more about because they went crazy in overtime. So we'll talk a little bit more about that again in a separate video here. But you just have to tip your hat off to this group. Lexi Hull is another player who her box score will quite literally never, ever capture her impact. She finishes with 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and 12 points on 5 of 12 shooting. It's one of those games where she can be a great 3-point shooter. She was 0 of 5 in this game, and I did think a couple times like they really need her offense because if you look at who was left of this group, the only 2 starters from their preferred starting lineup from a few months back that were on the floor for this game were Lexi Hull and Natasha Howard. And so other players stepped up for sure. But you have Brianna Turner playing huge minutes. You have even Ariel Powers came in and gave them a couple minutes down the stretch. So it was just, Lexi Hull was one of those players that I don't think that the 7 rebounds capture her impact on the boards, and just the rebounds that she gets are just spectacular. The fact that she somehow manages to be in the mix of every loose ball, it feels like, no matter where she started on the floor. But if she hits a few threes, maybe that's all they need in this game, right? Like the margin was so slim here. Like, yes, they lost by 9 in overtime, but they were 1 point away from winning in regulation, right? That's the nature of going to overtime in the first place. So just want to say, like, as a basketball fan, I have no stake in the game. I don't live in Indiana. I have no connection to any of the players. I'm truly like a very unbiased spectator watching these WNBA playoffs. Part of the advantage of there not being a WNBA team in the city that I live in Boston. And I didn't grow up a fan of any team. So truly just watching good basketball. Like, this was one of the most fun teams I've ever watched in a playoff run. Like, truly, this was an incredible thing just to see. And just seeing players, I kept having to remind myself, like, they were waived this season. At one point this season, these players got told by the general manager of the program that they played for, the Los Angeles Sparks, told Odyssey Sims, like, we're cutting you. And here she is now. Well, most of the WNBA sits at home and watches, and she's sending a game to overtime in a game 5 in the WNBA semifinals against Asia Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces. Like, it is spectacular. And so they didn't get it done. Stephanie White says post game, like, there's no words to describe how special this group is. And that's not just coach speak. That's not just Stephanie White saying the right thing. I think for people sitting at home watching, it felt that way as well. And so the hard part is that, yes, they'll get another chance. And I think this was the beginning of a really special culture for this Fever team under Stephanie White as part of Kelsey Mitchell's leadership. Aaliyah Boston, I think she's only going to continue to get better. And I truly think she's really underrated because she does so many little things. And she's very physical. And, we'll see how that gets legislated in the future. In this game, I think it did hurt her because she got called for offensive foul after offensive foul and loose ball fouls and fouls that you wouldn't want to get called on your top players. So we'll see how that pans out. But a culture was established this season. And this was the 2025 Indiana Fever, Indiana Pacers will never be forgotten. And I think that it's kind of remarkable that this run followed the Pacers run, and both of them ended with the best player on the roster. I mean, Kelsey Mitchell really kind of powered them through this postseason. You can obviously count Caitlin Clarkson in that conversation as well, but throughout these playoffs, Kelsey Mitchell's been their best player, and she's ending on the floor covered in towels. And hopefully it's nothing serious, nothing long-term that can threaten her career. Hopefully nothing like an Achilles. But it was an eerily similar feeling of, like, this can't be how this spectacular run ends. And just like the Pacers, who didn't quit when Tyrese Halliburton went down, neither did the Fever. And when this game was going to overtime, I thought to myself, like, how is this possible? How did they get here? So I did want to say, as much as I am going to talk about the Aces in a separate video and talk about kind of how they pulled this off, for those that aren't watching that, I do want to give a shout out to Asia Wilson and Jackie Young, who combined for 65 points, were just absolutely dominant in this game. And I will say, as someone who voted for Jackie Young for all WNBA, certainly felt affirmed by that in this series, and in particular in this game. She came up massive, 32 points and 10 assists for her. They combined for 67 points. I forgot about Jackie Young's 2 final free throws there. And Chelsea Gray, who was pretty quiet for most of the night, finishes with 17 points and 6 assists, and 8 of those came in overtime. Jewell Loyd, who won't get a lot of screen time in this conversation, she was 2 of 7 from the field. This is the same Jewell Loyd that led the WNBA in scoring just a couple years ago. She had some big time plays, 4 offensive rebounds. A few of those were game changers down the stretch. Jewell Loyd has made a remarkable transformation from a primary go-to scoring option to a really good role player. And she's a really good role player now. So shout out to her. It hasn't been all easy this year. I think her moving to the bench was a good thing. But in this game, I actually don't know that you win this game without her. So we'll unpack the Aces further, but I did want to shout out some of the players that stood out the most. Obviously, Dana Evans hit a big shot there in overtime. That was a big one. Dana Evans has had some great moments for this Aces team as well. But the Fever's run has come to an end. That is what I'm going to be thinking about as I go to bed tonight, is that this was truly an honor of a run to watch. I can only imagine how Indiana Fever fans feel, how members of that organization feel right now, knowing that they just battled until the very final seconds. It's just the best feeling in sports. It's also the worst feeling because as much as they did so, it wasn't enough. The Las Vegas Aces will host the Phoenix Mercury in a series that begins on Friday, best of 7, and we'll have coverage here on this channel on WNBA Today on CLNS throughout that entire run. Really looking forward to this matchup. There's a lot to unpack there, and we'll be doing so in the coming days. So leave us a like, leave us a comment, subscribe. WNBA Today and CLNS. This is actually the 2-week anniversary of us launching this channel. So shout out to the almost 1,000 of you that have subscribed. That's our goal for the end of these playoffs.